we are rich in baseball analysts this morning. That's where
Yeah.
we're going to start. We are going to get to the NFL Week 3 slate coming up. Here's our panel. Good morning. Matt Meiselman, DraftKings contributor, Garion Thorne, Kenny Ducey. We're covering the bases, dude. This is when you share with us your favorite MLB plays. We're going to do DFS and sports betting. So first base here, favorite game total. Kenny, talk to me.
Yeah, this is not one that you'd really expect. You've got the Mariners going up against the left-handed pitcher. You've got the A's who've scored 4 runs in the last 2 games. So over 8.5 runs. Are you serious, Kenny? Yeah, I like it. Here's 2 pitchers who have terrible regression candidates. You've got Chris Flexen with an expected ERA, a full run above his real-life ERA. Same thing with Cole Irvin. The history with Cole Irvin, he's 0-3 this year against the Mariners. He has not allowed fewer than 3 earned runs in any of those starts. So for some reason, the Mariners can't hit lefties, but they really can hit Cole Irvin. And this A's team, I really think, is just destined to break out. I'll touch on it in a second, but a very low strikeout rate is going to be crucial against a low strikeout pitcher in Chris Flexen. I think that Chris Flexen's abilities to limit hard contact can be really tested in this one. I think the A's come out with a vengeance here. We saw them struggle against Tyler Anderson and then get to that Mariners bullpen. I think that this is finally a situation where they can attack a starter and get on top early and perhaps put up a lot of runs, and then the Mariners respond against Cole Irvin.
All right, what do you think, Garion? Favorite game total? Please share it with us.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting spot tonight, and it's a situation we talked a little bit about on the show yesterday, but you've got serious wind coming in Chicago, and wind probably plays a bigger factor to the total at Wrigley Field than anywhere else in baseball, and yet, despite I'm hearing 25 to 30 mile per hour gusts coming into left field, I still like the over. This was a depressed line yesterday because of the wind, and there were still 14 runs scored because at the end of the day, the Twins and Cubs just can't pitch. Maybe there won't be a bunch of home runs to left field, but there could be 20 hits between these two teams because, again, they cannot pitch. In fact, the Twins have hit the over in 58.3% of their games so far this season. That is by far the highest mark in baseball because they've still got a pretty good lineup, even if they can't pitch. Chicago, kind of a similar boat. They've been one of the best offensive teams in baseball since the start of August for whatever reason. These two teams across the last 14 days are actually both top 10 in baseball in isolated powers. So there's the potential to score a lot of runs in this contest. Right now, the total is at 7. In Kyle Hendricks' last start, he allowed 7 earned runs by himself. This is someone who has an ERA over 9 in his past 7 games. So I understand why people could be hesitant. I understand why maybe this is a stay away spot because that's what the weather tells us to do. But I just don't trust either of these pitching staffs. So if I see a number like 7 attached to a Cubs-Twins game, I just have to take the over.
All right, Matty, bring us home here on first base.
Oh, man. So I'm glad that Garion went first because I thought at first he was going to steal the pick I was going with, but he's actually on the opposite side of it. That wind in Wrigley is wild. And I know yesterday I was the one saying I liked the under because the wind was blowing in. But that was Griffin Jax and Alec Mills. This is Kyle Hendricks, who isn't great, but he's better than Alec Mills. And Joe Ryan is a legitimately elite pitching prospect. So I know the Twins have bad pitching across the board, but he's the one guy on their staff who's actually potentially really good. This is also, like, we're looking at maybe 30 miles per hour of wind compared to yesterday where it was only 20. And this game, I don't really know what's going to happen. Maybe it's hard to have command of the strike zone because there's so much wind. Maybe they just cancel the game because the wind is too much of a factor. But for Hendricks specifically, like I think because he's a guy who lets the ball get put in play a lot, like the wind will just save him. He's not going to walk batters. They're not going to just be walking around the bases. Like that's the concern when you have a wind game where maybe the pitcher doesn't even utilize it because they don't throw the ball in the strike zone. With Kyle Hendricks, that's never really a problem. They're going to hit the ball in the air against him, and we basically have a backstop above all of the fences around the stadium. So I'm actually very excited to see how this game plays out, but I think the under here is a really strong play just because the wind is such a factor, like Garion said, at Wrigley Field. It's a totally unique circumstance to have this much of a wind effect. And then the last point on this is the temperature is much cooler than it's been for most of Hendricks' season. In the summer, when it's warmer, the ball flies out of Wrigley. This is not that circumstance. So I think that the situation is just a lot different than what it's been for either of these teams.
Let's move on to second
All right,
base.
Gary, and I'll just text you about Conor McGregor then.
Which is your favorite player prop? Garion, talk to us.
I think Ian Anderson's strikeout prop is really light tonight, and the fact it's at plus money, plus 120 for over 4.5 strikeouts, seems a little insane, honestly. I know he came off the IL, and somehow in his first 2 starts, he did not record a single strikeout, but Ian Anderson is someone who, for his career, an albeit brief career, is usually hovering around a 25, 26% strikeout rate. His last 2 starts, he struck out 16 opponents in 10 2/3 innings. It's a 34.8% strikeout rate. Arizona, to their part, over the last 2 weeks, has the 4th highest called plus swinging strike rate in baseball. They also have a top 10 strikeout rate in baseball, around 25%. I just think this is a huge overreaction to someone not being at 100% coming off the IL initially, but we're now talking about his 5th start since he came off the injured list. Ian Anderson's back to being Ian Anderson, and this number is way too low, so I will take the over here.
All right, Matt, what do we think? Player prop that stands out to you?
So there's a couple, but I think both pitchers at Coors Field have strikeout props that are a little too high. German Marquez, Walker Buehler, both guys that have been good this year, especially Buehler, who was actually the Cy Young favorite for a while. But Marquez is better on the road. He also obviously doesn't face the Dodgers every time out. And the Dodgers are a lineup that doesn't strike out a lot. It's just a really good offense in general. Buehler going into Coors, and I think generally we would say the Rockies are bad and pitchers against them are a good thing. And even at Coors, that is usually true, but they aren't a team that strikes out a ton. So even if the run expectation for them isn't very high, I don't think this is a great matchup in terms of strikeouts. So we have the props for Buehler and Marquez, I think at 6.5 and 5.5. 6.5 and 4.5. And I'd like the under for both those guys. I think that this could be a game that just doesn't have many strikeouts. The game last night between Urias and Sensatella, both guys went under their strikeout prop. So it's not that bold of a take to say Coors Field limits strikeouts, but I think the lines are a little too high there.
All right, Kenny, how about you? What's your favorite player prop?
Yeah, I'm going to go another low strikeout game. I think Chris Flexen goes under 3.5 strikeouts. There's been a little market agreement. I wrote this down at minus 120. It's now minus 125. The A's own a 17.2% strikeout rate over the last 2 weeks. That is the second best in baseball. Flexen ranks in the bottom 8% of the league in strikeout rate. And I know he has gone over this very low number in 5 of his last 6 outings. The last outing that he had, however, he did not go over this number. And I see Chris Flexen not lasting very long in this game. I really do think that the A's jump him early. This is a great spot against a team that's not striking out and a guy that doesn't strike many people out at all. I think that we should see plenty of batted balls and not a lot of swings and misses for Chris Flexen.
Let's go to third base. Let's go to the hot corner here. Favorite DFS pitcher? Maddie, start us off.
Well, I think we're going to have to talk about the wind just a little bit more. I mentioned Kyle Hendricks before. I mean, he is my favorite play on this slate, and I think that Joe Ryan will probably be something like the second or even the most popular pitcher on this slate. It's probably Zack Wheeler, but Ryan gets up there. I don't think anyone's playing Kyle Hendricks because he's just not very good. He's not a guy who normally gets a lot of strikeouts, but I think the opportunity for him to stay in this game for several innings and like an inning or two longer than he normally would in a good start, I think that opportunity is just there because if he allows a lot of medium length fly balls in Wrigley, sometimes those wind up over the fence. Tonight, I think none of them wind up over the fence. And I think that he has a chance to put up one of his better games of the season if he can just throw the ball in the strike zone. Again, like this is a very quirky scenario in Wrigley with the wind blowing in to this extent. I don't think we've had a game like this. Certainly not this season and probably not in a couple of years. So I think playing both pitchers in this Wrigley game makes sense, but Hendricks in particular, I think will be the more contrarian option. He's only 7,500, so he's my favorite play on the slate.
Kenny, what about you, weather dude?
I like Ian Anderson at $8,400. And with Garion here, Arizona owns just a 292 WOBA over the last 2 weeks. And Anderson has been on a tear with 16 strikeouts over his last 2 starts. It's not pretty when you look at the earned runs and the home runs that he's allowed. And, but look, he's lasting. We know he's got incredible talent. We know he's got incredible swing and miss upside. And the 16 strikeouts over the last 2 starts really give me a lot of encouragement that Ian Anderson can handle an Arizona team that looks absolutely dead in the water. I think that he gets the win here as a heavy favorite on the DraftKings Sportsbook, and I think that makes him a very good option at pitcher at just $8,400. I agree with Gary in here. I think that the projections are way too low on him.
All right, talk to me here, Garion.
So yeah, I do like Ian Anderson at 8,400, but since Kenny talked about him already, let's talk about Zack Wheeler for a second, because I do think he's in an interesting spot tonight. He's going to be supremely popular. There's no question about that. He's the most expensive pitcher on this slate. He's been pitching really well lately. 1.02 ERA, 2.31 FIP across his last 3 starts, a 32% strikeout rate within that span of time. But it's also just the way the top end of this pitching kind of shakes out tonight, where it's hard to find anyone who can match the upside of Wheeler. Like, I think you can count the amount of guys who have the potential to score 30 DraftKings points on one hand tonight, and maybe even on one finger, and that one finger is Zack Wheeler, because Luis Garcia is simply not the archetype of pitcher that should be $10,000. You've got, as Matt mentioned, Walker Buehler going into Coors Field, where that not only affects the possibility for home runs and things of that nature, but it does limit his strikeout upside. And then Chris Sale, who really has been, I don't want to say babied since he's come off the IL, but he's not been a guy who's going to go out there and throw 110 pitches. If you get 5, maybe 6, if you cross your fingers, innings out of Chris Sale, that's probably the best case scenario here. And he's yet to crest 30 DraftKings points since he's come off the IL. So I do think Wheeler has to be viable just because he clearly has the most upside of any pitcher on tonight's slate.
All right, fellas, take us home. Which lineup is your early favorite to stack tonight on the DFS side?
I'm just going to go with the Astros. They're the hottest team in baseball. They're going up against a rookie pitcher in Jansen Junk. Junk only 2.1 career innings at AAA before getting the call-up. He now has like 8 innings in the majors, and he's got a 7.48 expected ERA, a 7.41 FIP. The nice thing about the Astros, I know Matt touched on this yesterday, is they're really kind of just rotating through their regulars and resting 1 to 2 guys a night, which still leaves you like 3 or 4 premium bats in this lineup who are, some of them, if you're talking about like Correa or Tucker or Bregman, are pretty moderately priced for where they usually are in 2021, but it allows guys like Aledmus Diaz, who's $3,000, Jose Siri, who's $2,100. Sometimes they sneak into premium lineup positions because the Astros are so willing to kind of coast to the finish line here. So they're a nice mix of high upside elite bats and really cheap younger bats in high leverage lineup positions. So I like the Astros a lot tonight.
All right, Matt, which lineup is your favorite to be stacking tonight on the DFS side?
So I think Garion's right about the Astros. The problem is I think they will be the chalk offense tonight. I think the Yankees will be right up there with them. To quickly finish Kenny's point, I actually am interested in the Giants too, but after the couple guys he mentioned, Brandon Crawford's 5,900, Brandon Belt's 5,800. They're really expensive outside of a couple guys in their lineup. So I actually think the Dodgers will not be that popular, maybe only the 3rd or 4th highest on the offense, because there are teams like the Astros and the Yankees, maybe even the Braves, who are actually cheaper. And if you're going to pay up for guys that are around 6K, sure, the Giants are an appealing spot, but you have Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Max Muncy, Justin Turner at Coors Field. It's Herman Marquez, so it's probably the best Rockies pitcher, but I think the Dodgers go a little bit overlooked because those prices are a little hard to get to. You're going to have a slate where everyone's trying to jam in Zack Wheeler, and as a result of that, I think you see way more lineups look towards some of these cheaper teams like the Houston Astros with some of their backups in the lineup. So stacking some of the high-end Dodgers, I think, will be hard for most people to do unless you want to play both pitchers at Wrigley. So that's kind of the route I'm looking to leave Zack Wheeler alone, not because I think he'll be bad, but so that I can play these expensive Dodgers that are otherwise hard to afford.